Hello and welcome to Be So Creative Studios here in Las Cruces, New Mexico. I'm Ellen McNovich and I'm going to walk you through a beautiful project today called the Elegant Evergreen. It's a little wall hanging, seasonal wall hanging that was done completely on the Solaris, the Babylock Solaris machine in the IQ Designer. And if you have an IQ Designer and you have perhaps a Destiny or another machine that is not the Solaris, but you will still be able to do this. There'll just be a few places where you'll need to make a few sizing changes, but anyone with an IQ Designer can do this. It's also great for any level. Even if you are brand new to your machine, brand new to quilting, if you haven't played around with your IQ Designer yet, you are still going to be able to do this project and you're going to learn a lot on the way. Let me show you what you're going to need for this section of the instructions, which is part A, where we're going to be building the design. You will need the scanning tray that comes with your machine and a couple of magnets to hold on your image. Of course, have your instructions handy that you should have been sent, or if you purchased the class, you'll be able to download these. And in those instructions, you will have one page which is our tree design. So you're going to need to keep that handy. And I also highly recommend a wired mouse. I believe for this project that using a mouse and the pointer on the mouse is the best way to draw on your IQ screen. And you have a port on the right side of your Solaris or your machine that is dedicated to the mouse. So you'll see a little mouse picture, and that's where you want to plug in your mouse. So let's go over to the machine and get started. So I'm going to be plugging in my wireless mouse here. The very first thing we are going to be doing is creating the quilting background. So this project is going to be quilted first. Usually, and mostly when you quilt, you create your quilt top and then you go back and quilt around the, fill in the spaces. But we're going to fill the whole thing with quilting. That way we can just layer our applique pieces on top. So in order to do that, we're going to go over to our screen, go into your page settings, which looks like a little page with a corner bent down. And here you're going to move over to the embroidery settings where it looks like a hoop. And the very first choice you will have is your embroidery frame display. And this is where you will choose the size of hoop you will be using. We're going to be using the very largest hoop. So choose your 15 5/8 by 16-inch hoop. And then come over to the grid and choose the 1-inch grid. Hit OK. And now we are ready to go into IQ Designer. Now the IQ Designer page, you can see the grid that we chose, that 1-inch grid. And just for some basic understanding of what's going on this page, up here in the top, nearly the top right, you have things that have to do with lines. This section draws and edits lines. And this section right below it, where you see the color block, draws and edits shapes or filling in between the lines. And then here we have a couple of tools, an eraser tool and a tool to draw shapes. Now normally if I was going to draw something on IQ Designer, I would take advantage of some of these shapes in here, but this design is an unusual shape. Those tree parts are no shape, except for the star. I could probably find the star shape. In fact, I did find the star shape in there originally when I built this design. But these, we can't find a shape like that, so we're going to have to figure out a way to get these shapes in the machine ourselves. We can either draw around them, or we can scan them in, and what we're going to be scanning them in. But the first thing we want to do is fill the whole background with our quilting design. And to do that, I'm going to go here into the fills, and if I push on this, I get all things to do with the fill. I'm going to push on the big fill menu here, the one farthest to the right, and this sends me down to a whole bunch of beautiful quilting patterns. And I'm going to scroll down here, and of course you can choose whichever one you want. The one I chose is 034, and hit OK. And I'm going to choose a color of yellow. It doesn't matter which yellow you choose, it's going to be in the background. And remember that these colors I'm choosing have nothing to do with the colors you're going to actually use when you sew out the design. These are just colors we use to draw the picture, and we want to use different colors for each step so that the machine will recognize which step we're on and we will be able to follow where we are. So I'm going to choose a yellow color and hit OK, and nothing happens. And that's because even though I have chosen that color and that design, as I can see in my window, I have not assigned those anywhere yet. So in order to assign those, I'm going to hit the fill bucket. Notice that there are two buckets. This bucket will change lines, but this bucket will change spaces, and I want to fill this whole space. So when I choose the bucket and then tap in my space, the entire space is now filled with that beautiful feather design. When I hit next, I now have ways to edit that design. And here again, you are welcome to edit it however you like, but I chose for mine to increase the overall size of the design by about 20%. So right here I can go up to 120% on size and hit OK. And the other thing I want to change is at the very bottom, you see the 4 circles, and I have 2 choices. I can triple stitch this design or single stitch it. Since this is just background quilting, I want it to be thin, and so I'm going to hit the thinnest line and hit OK. And now my design has been recalculated, and it's difficult to see, I know, because I have a yellow color here. Just for a moment, I want to go in and I'm going to choose something dark so that you can see what I have done here, and maybe you can see a little bit better what your screen should look like, but yours is going to be a yellow color. Now that I have this done, it's exactly the way I want it. I'm going to go over to Set, and it's going to ask me if I'm ready to leave IQ Designer and go to Embroidery, and I am, so I hit OK. And now I get a preview screen of what my embroidery is going to look like. It already knows that I'm in the largest hoop, so it's going to embroider throughout the entire space of that hoop. And once I hit embroidery now, I am in the embroidery section of the machine. I cannot go back and edit this anymore. If I don't like the way it looks, I can't just hop back to IQ Designer and tweak it a little bit. It's gone now. It's in embroidery. Of course, it wasn't hard to do, so if you don't like the way it looks, you can always just go and start over. It was an easy few steps. So now that I've got this in embroidery, I can choose layout if I like, but I don't want to move it or rotate it or change it in any way. The only thing I do want to do under layout is I want to create a basting stitch all the way around this line. So in the layout menu, there's a picture of a flower with a little basting stitch around it. And when I push that, a basting stitch has now been added to my design. So when I hit return, over on the right-hand side of the edit box, I have created 2 steps of stitching. I have one step that is a basting line, and it doesn't matter what color it's in. Here it is in a black color thread. They just assigned it a black color. And then I have this design, which is my background. And if you want to know the color that it chose for you, you can hit the little arrow and it chose a yellow Madeira thread on here. And of course, you can change your threads all you like. So I now have the foundation of my design. So this kind of covered step number 1 and 2. I actually created 2 first and then 1. I added my basting stitch. Right here is a very important point that I want to make. This word add is going to be your best friend, because when I hit add, it's going to save this design in embroidery, keep it there safe and sound for me while I go back to IQ Designer and build my next step. If you accidentally hit backwards or delete or anything else, you're going to lose this design. But if I hit add, it will go back. The other thing I want to tell you is if you want to just be double safe, at any time when you're getting your steps built over here, you can hit the word memory and save this into your machine's memory. And now it's there just in case you do something drastic like accidentally delete it or lose a step or something like that. So we're going to be double safe now. And by the way, I forgot to mention that over on page 6 of your instructions, I have shown you what all of your steps are going to look like when you get this design finished. So right now you should have step 1 made here with the basting and step 2 made here with your background fill. And that's how it should look on your screen, and I'm going to hit add. Now I have my menu again, and it's time to go back to IQ Designer. And now we are going to make our tree shape. So for the tree shape, we need our line drawing. When you are using line drawing on your Solaris, you want to start with the best drawing you can get. Something that isn't too smudgy. You don't want a lot of stray marks on your page. You don't want these lines too thick. If the line is too thick, the machine will recognize it as an area that it wants to fill, instead of just one single line of stitching that it wants to draw. And the other thing is, if you draw this with a Sharpie pen or any kind of a pen or pencil, you have different pressure as you go along. So some areas will be black, some will be shades of gray, and the machine might become confused by the different colors or shades of blackness. So I start with a nice coloring book, a kind of picture that I have processed on my computer, if you have those skills. But the better line drawing, the clearer the line drawing, the more success the machine is going to have. I'm going to attach this to the embroidery screen by just using a couple of the magnets that came with the machine. And here you want to be sure that your magnets are as far over as you can get them. The reason is that once we get this scanned in, we're going to be cropping it, and it's going to crop as a rectangle. And of course, if you have something here and you try to crop a rectangle around it, you're going to end up with that magnet in the picture. So it's not hard to get it to stay on here. So I'm actually even putting mine over the edge, and now I'm going to attach it just like a regular embroidery hoop. So we are on step 3 now, where we are going to create the placement line. And over here in IQ Designer, I have a little fern icon, a leaf or fern, and those are my scanning choices. There are 3 ways to scan. The first one is for image, such as a photograph or anything. If you've already got a design in your hoop that you want to photograph, it's just going to take a picture of whatever is in the hoop. But the next 2 are a little bit more sophisticated, and they actually have some more digitizing information in them. The line drawing is for just black and white lines, or black lines on white paper, and that's exactly what we have here. And the illustration design is something you will use for multicolored, a simple multicolored icon type design. So let's hit line design. You're going to be asked again to scan. It's going to warn you that the frame will move, and here we go. It will make about 4 passes as it goes over the design. do be very sure that you don't bump your machine at all. If you wiggle or bump your machine, or if something's in the way of your hoop and it gets knocked around, you will get wiggly lines appearing on your image instead of a nice clean line. So now we're on step 4, and over here on my screen I see my very nice picture of my line design. Now down here I have some grayscale detection level arrows, and this is what you might have to use if you hand drew or had a line drawing that wasn't as good and as clean as mine. You might need to tell it how dark of a gray shade of gray to pick up. But ours should come out very nice the way it is. I don't know if you can see, well, you can see pretty good on mine. It's so sensitive, the camera's so sensitive that you can actually see a line where the edge, the bottom of my paper was. And you might see those lines all the way around your design. So we're going to take care of those right now by touching on the red arrows that are on the right side and then bringing them in a little bit. You will notice as you do this that there's a little bit of delay from when you move to when the line moves. So I've learned to hit and move and wait a second. And my goal is to crop this so that the red line is around my tree, but I have gotten rid of all those edges on my paper. And I'm pretty happy with that. So I am going to choose OK. And now I'm going to choose Set. You will still see the whole image that was taken. I can still see my magnets and the edge of my paper. But up here, I can dim my drawing all the way to where it completely disappears. And now all I see is the red line that is my selection box. So now I have my tree, but it's not the right size. It's only the size that fit on an 8.5 by 11 paper, and I want mine to be much bigger than that. So I can now size this, and so I am on step 6 right now if you're following along on the instructions. And I am going to go over here to the word size. And up here there's one that allows me to go in all 4 directions higher. So if I hit that, I'm aiming for the numbers 14.86 by 9.41. If yours is a little different than that, it's okay, as long as it's around 14.5 or 15 inches tall. This is a place where if you are working on a Destiny or Meridian or something else besides a Solaris, you are going to want to make your tree a little bit smaller. And what you want to do is you want to get it so that it's about an inch below your extreme borderline of your hoop. And so it's probably not going to let you go much higher than that, but you don't want it to be all the way to the top of your hoop. You want about an inch of distance between your top and your bottom of your design, so it'll be centered in there. I like that, so I'm going to hit OK. And the last thing I need to do is assign these lines. So I'm on step 7 now, and I need to tell the machine how I want these lines to stitch out. So I'm going to go up here to my line properties box. And I want this line to be a double run. I want it to stitch around twice, so that's this icon. And I want to choose a color that will distinguish it from the previous step that I made. So I'm going to choose a shade of blue. Hit OK. Notice nothing happens. I haven't assigned it yet. So I'm going to hit my line assignment bucket. And now I have to push right on a line. When you do, you'll hear the little beep telling you that you did select something, and you'll see the star turn blue, and you'll see each section turn blue, even down to the trunk. If you're not sure, you can hit it again and you'll hear a knock knock sound that tells you that it was already selected. So you can check and make sure everything is selected, and it is. So what I have created now is an outline of a tree in the color blue. Now here is a time when we definitely want to save in memory. We've put a lot of work into this. We've got it just the size we want, and we are going to be coming back to this tree 3 or 4 more times to finish our design, because we're going to stitch this over and over using different stitchings and fills. So we want to be sure and save this in the IQ memory. In your Solaris machine, you have several different memories in this machine. The embroidery had a memory. The utility stitches and decorative stitches have separate memories. And IQ Designer has a separate memory. So just because you save something one place doesn't mean it's going to show up in the other memory. So I need to save this to IQ Designer memory. And I'm going to put it into the memory of the machine. These just mean if you had a USB stick in there and you wanted to save it to a stick, you could, but we want this in the machine because we want to be able to get it back out a few more times. Now I'll hit next. When you hit next, you're going to get the opportunity to change the stitch length. It's called the run pitch here, and I just call it the stitch length. Now it's set by default at 0.08 millimeters, or inches, excuse me. We sewists are kind of stuck between 2 worlds, between the inch world and the millimeter world. And I know a lot of us like to think in inches when we are doing embroidery designs, but when we are using our machine stitches, believe it or not, you are already thinking in millimeters. Maybe you didn't know that already, but you already are used to the setting 2.5 as your stitch length. 2.5 is the setting in millimeters, and this 0.08 inches equals a 2.5 millimeter long stitch. So this is just, actually this is a 2 millimeter stitch. The 0.08 is a 2 millimeter stitch, so it's like setting your stitch length to 2. If you would like to go up and set to a 2.5, that translates to a 0.1 inches. But you don't have to worry about any of that math because we're just going to use the default. So if this is on 0.08, you are just fine. And so we like that. And so we can review here that we have chosen the color blue, we have chosen a double run, and we're not changing anything here, so we're ready to hit the word set. It's telling us, reminding us, so this is a great place to check yourself. Oh, I forgot to save this into memory. This is where you could hit cancel, you could go back and save it in memory again, or for the first time. And it just is nice that it warns you before you're leaving, because once you leave, you would have to come back and build this whole tree again, scan it and everything, because it won't even save the scan in there. So we're ready to hit OK, and voila, I have added my next step. And there it is, my blue tree. And that will be my tack down line. It's going to be a line that's stitched to show me where each of my decorative fabrics are going to go. So by now you probably know what we need to do from this point to add our next step. Go to Add. Now if you like, if you want to be double sure, you can also hit memory here and save it into the embroidery memory, a different spot than IQ memory. But you can save your embroidery design if you want to be sure, and now hit the word Add, and it will keep it back there. And it's even shown me here on the screen that this is what is being saved in the background for me while I create the next step. Let's go back to IQ Designer. And we are now over at step number 8 in your instructions, and we are going to make a tack down line. So when you applique designs, that design stitches out on your white background, and then you lay a little scrap of fabric over it, and the next step is it comes back and sews that exact same line on top of your decorative fabric, and then you come along with your scissors and trim along that fabric edge. And then the final step is that you choose a decorative stitch to cover up that raw edge. So in my design, we'll be covering up these raw edges, but this one you notice we're going to do a little bit differently. This one I've chosen a triple stitch, and this raw edge will be exposed. So when we get into the sewing section in part B, I'll show you how I do that a little bit differently. But right now we're creating a tack down line that's going to sew around each design so that we can come and trim it. So in order to make our tack down line, well, of course we want it to sew exactly on top of where the previous placement line was. So I saved that tree design, fortunately, so all I have to do is go into the little pocket with the arrow going out of it, and there is my lovely tree that I saved right there, so I don't have to build this all over again. And boy, you really wouldn't want to, because it would have to be exactly the same size as the first one. That's why we saved it. So we're going to hit OK, and there's my familiar looking tree. I don't have to do much here because I still want it to be a double run line, but I do want to change the color. So in my stitch menu, I'm going to select double run, and this time I'm going to give it, I believe I decided on the color pink. So I'm going to find a nice shade of pink here, hit OK, and assign with my bucket all my shapes. I can hit next. I'm going to keep the stitch length or the run pitch the same, and I don't need to save this. Why? Because I've already got the blue one saved in memory, and it's exactly like this one. So I don't need to save the pink one. I just need to go to Set, OK, and there's my fourth step. At this point, again, if you'd like to be doubly sure, you can hit memory and now hit the word add, and this is probably starting to get very familiar now. I'm back to IQ Designer. This time I want to create the fill that goes in the leaf sections of the tree. Now I know that pine trees have pine needles, not leaves, but I didn't want to use the word needles because I think needles has another connotation in sewing. So I just call this the leaves. So in our leaf sections, you notice that I have added some gold thread to make a little texture in those and fill them up nicely. And we're going to create that stage of the design. We need to do the fill first. We want the fill to be first before we layer on top that cover stitch. So the fill will be next. So let's go to the pocket. Let's bring in our tree. OK. And there is my tree again. Now this time, I don't want the tree to stitch an outline again. I've already stitched 2 outlines on it, and I don't need an outline again on the tree. I just want to fill the space in between. So I'm going to go to Line Properties, and this time, instead of double run, I'm going to choose No Sew. It's a zigzag stitch with a red line through it. It means don't sew this. It's going to keep the shape there, but it's not going to actually sew the line around it. I can't pick a color because it's not going to be sewn, so I hit OK. But I do have to assign No Sew to each part. So hit your bucket. You can barely see the color change here because it changes to a faint black, almost a dotted line, trying to let me know that I've chosen something that's not going to be sewn, but it still wants to show me where the shape is. It's still there. So you can always confirm up here that that's what you've chosen. And now I'm ready to fill the 3 sections of my leaves. Fill Properties, choose your design, and for this fill, I chose these flames number 030. Okay. And now I want these to be a beautiful green color. So I'm going to choose green and OK. I have to tell the machine where I want that fill, so I will choose the bucket under Fill Properties. And right in between, now this time you don't want to touch a line, you want to touch the space in between the lines, and there are my 3 fills. I forgot to mention that at any time when you touch the wrong thing, if I accidentally touched the star, oh, I didn't want fill in the star, you can always go back 1 step with your backward arrow, and it'll take away what you did. And if you should accidentally touch out here, the whole thing will fill because you touched the background. But you can always go back, and you can keep going back as many steps as you need to, which is a nice feature. When I hit next, I'm now going to get the editing properties for my fill. So I have decided that I wanted my fill to be a little bit larger than the regular flames. So under the size, again, I am going up to 120. And then down here under the thickness, and this is up to you actually, I did mine with a single thickness. But once I got it on there, I thought, that gold thread might have been pretty triple stitched. You might like it triple stitched better. So it's up to you, depending on what your thread looks like. But for the sake of following the instructions that I wrote you, I chose a single thickness for mine. And now I am happy with that, and I'm going to go to Set, OK, and again it added it to my design. So there is my next step. I can hit Memory just to be careful, and now I'm going to hit Add because I want to return to IQ Designer. It's starting to look like a big mess on there because we've put so many colors, but it's going to sew out really beautifully. Of course, all of this place where the leaves are is going to be covered over by your fashion fabric that you have, by your decorative fabric. So you're not going to see all of those yellow background stitches in there. Time to go to IQ Designer. This pocket, by the way, would take us into the embroidery memory. I forgot to hit IQ Designer. And now this pocket will open up IQ Designer memory. Here's my tree one more time. And now I am on step number 13, where we are going to put the cover stitches around all of our shapes. So the first cover stitch I want to add is a purple one for the star. So I'm going to choose triple stitch this time. Instead of double run, I'm going to choose triple. And I'm going to choose a purple color, OK, and assign with the bucket to my star. For the next 3 sections, I'm going to go, I'm sorry, I did that wrong. I'm going to go back into my line properties, and this time I'm going to choose the zigzag satin stitch. It's the first one to choose. So let's pick a red color for this one here. We haven't chosen red yet. And now I'm going to assign it to the top, middle, and bottom leaf sections. So those will now be red. And the last thing I want to do is for my trunk. And I want to go here and choose satin stitch, brown color. And I'm going to assign that to my trunk. So now I have assigned a satin stitch to go around all of the sections and a triple stitch to go around my star. So now I'm going to hit Next. And here's where you want to be really conscientious about where your red line is. The red line is just around the star right now. And it shows me how I have that star filled. I have it with a triple stitch and with a purple. And I can change the run stitch right now of the star. If I want to change one of the other sections, what I can do is use these arrows, and as I arrow each one, it will choose the next little block, and now I can edit that block. So I was happy with my star. I like it the way it is, but now I'm going to arrow down. If you choose the chain lock, you get the entire design. It will actually change everything on the design, and I don't want to do that. So I'm going to take that off. So my box is around the top one. So right here, I have decided that I would like my zigzag stitch to be a little wider than the default. It has defaulted here at a 0.08. So I decided to change mine to a 2.5. So I'm going to choose that. I'm going to go up. And for inches, it's going to be a 0.1. So I'm going to go up until I get 0.1 inches. If you are in millimeters, it's going to be a 2.5. So it's going to be a little bit thicker, zigzag width, 0.1, and I'm going to hit OK. So now it has made this zigzag stitch a little bit larger, and you might be able to see that this one does look a little bit thicker than these two. That's because I haven't changed these two yet. I'm going to arrow down to my middle section, and oh, I'm so glad this happened. This is a rare, very good thing that happens sometimes. When I arrowed over to the next section, I got a little tiny thing that showed up right here. That tells me that there was a stray mark somewhere on my original scan. Maybe a fly landed on your scanning tray while you were scanning this. It's going to pick up, or maybe a flea or a speck of something. It's going to pick it up, and I didn't know until now. It's not something I could have seen until I selected this, but I've actually got something on there, and I need to get rid of that little guy. So I'm going to do that by going to Return. I can see it now. It's a little black dot right on there. So this is a great little lesson. We're going to learn how to do this. So there it is. Who knew? I couldn't even see it. It's hard to see with the naked eye. On the bottom of this screen, there is a box with dotted lines around it, and that is your selection tool. When you choose that, you can select different areas of your design in several different ways. And if you have the one here highlighted with a box, you can come and draw a box around it just like that. But what you can also do is just take this eraser tool, and you can choose the size of your eraser. And this is a great time to use your mouse, and I can just erase. So I didn't really have to choose the selection tool. I could have just selected it and cut it, deleted it. So before, when we had it selected, I could have hit the scissors and deleted it, or I could have just hit the eraser button and just erased over it. So it should be gone now. So I'm going to see if that's true. I'm going to go to Next. And I'm going to go down, and now it didn't select it anymore. So now I've got the middle selected. So sometimes it's good that those little things happen, because it's a great learning opportunity. It's something that will happen to you if you have a little stray mark somewhere. And that's all that it means. So now I can go ahead over here and remember that I was going to change my stitch width to a 0.1 inches and hit OK. It's already red. I like the color. And now I'm going to select my final one. Notice where your red box is, because that's the only thing that will change. And finally, I want to do the same thing to the trunk of my tree. It should be the next one that I select. And again, I want it to also be a little thicker. So it's going to be a 0.1 inches. And it is reminding me that I chose brown color for that, and that's exactly what I wanted. Hey, this looks good. Purple star, red leaves, a brown trunk. I like what I've got. But this was a lot of work, and if I made a mistake, I would hate to redo all this, so this is a great time to save this into the IQ Designer memory, just in case I get to the embroidery part and realize that I did something wrong. So now I'm going to hit set, and it's going to add it, and there it is. If I slide down here, I can see my final step now, which is all 3 colors, and underneath that step, it has assigned 3 colors, purple, red, and brown. So this looks terrific. Now I for sure want to hit memory on this one, because this is the design I'm going to come back later and stitch out. In fact, this is a design I might want to stitch over and over, so it's going to be in my memory. If you want to go to that memory, add here, if I go into the pocket and look at my memory, you can see all those steps that I saved. I saved the background, the tack down. I saved each step. I don't really need them now. I've got my final tree, and I know I like my final tree. So if you ever want to go back and erase these, you can just hit the editing button right here, and then you can select something here and hit delete, and it'll take those out of your memory. That way, these might be confusing. You won't be using them to stitch out. You're just going to do the one that's right there. I'm going to cancel that because I wanted to save those in there. All right, so I'm going to hit return, and there's my design all ready to go. So that should have gotten you through all of part A. When we come back, we're going to be actually taking our pieces of fabric, layering them, putting them right in the hoop, and there's nothing to do but just watch the fun happen and watch the beautiful design we create stitch out. So before you get to part B, you want to get your fabrics all taken care of. You want to get your borders cut and your machine ready with your embroidery foot, and we'll be back and ready to sew.